My lesson's out of Nehemiah chapter 4, but I'm going to have to do some backtracking to give some clarity to what's going on here. So Nehemiah, in chapter 1, Nehemiah finds that Jerusalem is in bad shape. The walls tore down. People are really having problems. It was put on his heart to go rebuild the wall. But the first thing he did was pray for 40 days. That's a long time. He prayed for 40 days, and Nehemiah was the cupbearer to the king. So after he prayed for 40 days, he went to the king, doing his duties as cupbearer. But he had the king's ear. The king asked him, he said, "You look sad, what's up?" And he said, yeah. And him hauls around for a second and says, "I hear Jerusalem's in really bad shape, and I want to go." King gives him his blessing, gives him letters, gives him some materials to help with the gates, and sends him on to Jerusalem. He goes for 3 days. He gets there, and them 3 days, he's like, "Oh man, this is going to be a job." In the Bible, have we ever seen anything of a job that somebody's going to have to do that's as big as this that he's about to take on? One came to my mind. Noah. Man, that was a big project. Build an ark. Do you think people made fun of Noah? 3 days. He sees how bad it is, and he says, "We're going to do this thing." Now, in chapter 3 of Nehemiah, you see where they're already rebuilding the gates. So different people live close to these gates. It might be priests, it might be just people that live close to these gates are rebuilding the gates. Now, what's a problem with the gate with no wall? Yeah, it's got to have a wall. So that was going to be Nehemiah's thing. He is going to take care of this wall. Now there was and I'm going to call him a governor. I guess is it Sanballat? Is that how you say his name? And Tobiah. I guess they were governors. Has anybody dealt with bullies? What do bullies like to do? They like to bully, but ridicule. I answered my own question. Ridicule. But they also like to have their circle of people, don't they? Have you ever seen a movie where there's a bully that's all by himself? No, he's always got this gang of people. It's just, I don't know what that mentality is. I don't understand it, but strength in numbers, I guess, is what they think. You gotta have Toby's to be a bully. Yeah, it's easier to have somebody back you up, isn't it? So here's Nehemiah. They get to the wall, and right from the start, they start. First, they're mad. They are not happy that this wall is going to be rebuilt at all. And they're calling the Jews feeble-minded. What are they going to do? Pray to their God and rebuild this wall in a day? They could have, couldn't they? Why do you think Nehemiah wanted to rebuild this wall?
Well, they needed it for protection.
Protection. The Jews needed it for protection, right?
It's a symbol of their identity.
It's a symbol of their identity. Nehemiah was really distraught in chapter 1 when he found out how bad a shape it was in. One for God. Because in a way, this wall represents the strength of God and how tore up it was among the people. If you really, really, really love the Lord, you stand up for it, don't you? Well, the Jewish people there in Jerusalem, they were probably as low can get. So they needed a rallying cry, you know. Here, let's do something to get back, not only put the wall back together, but put us back together as a group. Now, when you work together with somebody, there is a little togetherness, isn't it? You really go hand in hand with somebody, work with the people, just get in there and work as hard as you can. The people in Honduras, I just come back from Honduras. Katie would tell me stories of things that happened in Honduras, how close-knit the people that went to build these houses were, and the relationships they built with the families they were doing this for. Nehemiah was doing this for the people, make the people closer to God, and heal that fracture that put them into captivity, correct? I mean, they were in captivity and they had just got out of captivity when all this starts taking place. If you look at Ezra dealt with rebuilding of the temple. Nehemiah deals with the rebuilding of the wall. So these people in the first verse, in the fourth chapter, first verses, the first 3 verses, it's all how bad they are. You can't do this. You won't do this. You're too weak. You're too, you don't have, what are you going to do? Get the stones out of the trash heap? Now, I have no idea how the wall looked, but I looked for measurements. Best I can figure, they had 1.7 miles of wall to rebuild. They were building half as tall as it should have been, and the original wall was 39 feet tall. So we're talking 20 feet tall. And 8 foot wide. That is a lot of rock to move. And a whole lot of, like I said, I don't know how big these pieces of rock were. Pick it up and carry it like this, and stack it, or you got 10 people picking up one rock to get it moved and put it in place. Either way, a ton of work. So after all these insults are hurled, all these things are hurled, in the first 3 verses of chapter 4, we get to chapter 4 and 5. Nehemiah prays. And basically his prayer was, you take it and you heap their insults back on them. Just, I can understand, you're trying to do a good work and you got people just chattering in your ear all day long. And they were there day and night. And we're talking the army that Tobiah and Salbat had available to him. But what did they have? What did Nehemiah have that made it so they couldn't do anything to him? Really? They had some letters. They had these letters from the king. So they couldn't do legally, I'm going to say legally, but God. They had God. Matter of fact, let me see, there's Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem. Is that how you say his name? One of the things that I read, one of the commentators said those were the three stooges. Oh. Made me laugh. I said, that's pretty good. But you can tell when you're reading their insults and things like that, they are feeding off each other. So after verse 5, after the prayer, they get to work. They're working on the wall. Everything's going halfway decent. But in verse 7 and 8, we read they're plotting against the Jewish people. We're going to get you. When your back's turned, we'll be there. What does that do to morale? Morale to the floor. And when you have people talking among themselves, and this is almost like when Moses took the children out of Israel we were better off back where we were. No, you weren't. Might seem like it, but you weren't. But that's what all this talk does. And you don't hear much about the Jewish people doing the talking. It was the people, the governors and the things like that were just talking bad about them. Again, Nehemiah goes to prayer. And God's hand was in there and kind of foiled their plots and their things like that. But then something happened. They did something that, when I read it, I had to read it a couple of times because I'm going, okay. They put guards up. We're going to guard ourselves. That would be chapter, and then verse 9. So they put guards, had guards with them. Somebody there to protect them. One guy works, one guy's a guard. Somebody has your back. What does it do to you when you know somebody has your back? Brings you up, gives you some extra strength. You know, when you're always doing this right here and trying to do something, you can't get a whole lot done when you're looking behind you all the time, thinking somebody's going to come up with a sword and try to take you out. So they put guards up, put guards in place to watch the workers. I think that's kind of neat myself. So we get to chapter 10. The workers are tired. Would y'all be tired after building a wall I'd be tired after building a wall for a couple hours. Chris, you do construction. Would you imagine doing a 1.7 wall, 8 foot tall, 8 foot wide, 20 foot tall?
You know, something I thought that way. They didn't use 20 men, they used hundreds of men. So it's sort of funny. These people came from a heritage of Egypt, They do have moved stones. They did a lot of building in Egypt. And it's pretty proficient to move large stones. It took a lot of people. And they had done that themselves. I'm sure God's helping them. They do have moved stones.
Again, you use that key phrase, God's help. Throughout this chapter, Nehemiah goes to God a lot. I would imagine, we just read what we can read, but I would imagine it would be hourly, daily, minute by minute thing. That he's praying to God for help, for protection, just for reassurance. When my dad and mom have passed away in the last 5 years, both of them, and it really took this group here praying for me and for my family to realize how strong a group is. Because I couldn't have done it by myself. Just could not. So the group, and again, we don't know how many people we're talking about here. It had to be, like Chris said, with that amount of wall, it had to be a very large group of people. Then we get to chapter verse 11 and 12. In verse 11 and 12, now the enemy is going to ratchet up a notch. We're going to look to attack and put an end to this work. Why do you think they were so against this rebuilding the wall? I think they were against rebuilding the wall because they knew it would give the Jewish people strength. And just to be honest, the Jewish people lost it themselves. They didn't follow God. It goes this way through the Bible. They quit following God and they get tossed into captivity. They get out, they follow God for a little while, then oops, tossed into captivity. So it's the same story going in this whole thing. So they're just coming out of captivity. So they want, we want our freedoms back. We want to be able to do this, and we want to be. And now you got people looking to attack and end the work. Now we're talking fighting, right? Hey, we're looking to put an end to y'all and stop this wall. All this silliness y'all got going on, thinking you can rebuild this wall. There was a few other places here where it says, are you going to pray to God? Are you going to, is it going to happen in a day? Is it? One of the guys, Tobiah, said that a fox could walk across the top of it and make it fall down. And, just them kind of insults back and back and back. Now, I don't know how far they're into this when they're starting to look, they're going to attack.
This says the fourth chapter, verse 1, about Sanballat being governor of Samaria. It said perhaps he wanted to be governor of Judea as well, so it was rebuilt, divided them. And they had not given him the opportunity to do what he wanted to do.
And that's all, yep, I would think that's a great possibility. So who was the king of Judea at this time? Artaxerxes. So maybe he had kind of a thought in his head, he's so far away, I can kind of rule here however I want. And that could be a thought. I like your thought. I do. I think he wanted to move up. I think he wanted to move up in the succession of how to do things. So they start to again post guards. Now it's getting a little more complicated here. We're told in chapter 14, basically tells you, don't be afraid. Don't you worry about it. God has your back. Well, that's a pretty good person to have your back, isn't it? One thing I found really interesting was as you get further into the chapter, they're plotting against the workers. God frustrates the enemy. But then they work one to one. You got 20 guys with swords, 20 guys building, and they have their sword at their side, and they're working with one hand, sword in the other. What does that say to you? One thing come right to my brain when I read this, I'm going, whoa. Because there are some that believe we don't need to arm ourselves. Nehemiah here is saying, oh no, we're arming ourselves. And we don't want to fight, but we're going to be ready to fight at any moment. Now, this is the same Nehemiah that was praying to God. Don't you think he could have just said, okay, God, we don't want to arm ourselves. We don't want to do anything. But what does that tell you? What it kind of said to me was, God is saying, listen, I got your backs. But y'all are going to have some part in this too. Some skin in the game. If you think you're going to be attacked, I can remember growing up, we never locked the door at my house, ever. We had a key outside. It was when I pulled it down, last time I went to the house I grew up in, you couldn't even put it in the door. It was rusted. It was on top of the door outside. And I was asked, Dad, why do we got a key out here? We never locked the doors. Nowadays, I know some people don't lock their doors, but a whole lot fewer now than it used to be. So they're protecting their back. They're locking the door. Say, listen, if you're going to come in, you can come. But we're going to fight. So what does that do to a bully? What does a bully do if he knows you're going to fight him? Kind of backs away a little bit. Kind of shuts the rhetoric off, he may stand back and call you names, but he ain't going to pull in there and say, all right, we're ready to fight too. That don't happen very often. If you watch a movie where the bad guy is doing all the bad talk until the good guy whips him. So God has won. They armed themselves. Back to back. Can you see that? Back to back. That guy with sword. Guy with a sword right here. I have a sword at my side, and I'm picking up rocks and placing them. Now what happens? Can you work better if you know somebody's got your back? If you're not worried about spears or arrows or somebody attacking you from the back? You got the wall in front of you, so you're good there. So you got eyes in the back of your head. Your buddies are back there protecting you. That's pretty much part of this story. As you know how long it took them to build the wall? This was one of these I'm thinking, wow. Because the enormity of the wall and how fast it got rebuilt, 52 days. Less than 2 months. We can't even put Blue Lick Road down, down here has been
52 years.
God, it's ridiculous. You know, I mean, yeah, the Snyder's been under construction since it opened. 52 days.
Everybody's working together.
Working together. I think that's where we don't work together anymore, do we? It's more fun to fight against each other. People want to say, why is it taking so long to do this? Well, if you quit fighting and just go build it, it's going to need to be built anyway. They just had that fire in somewhere where it collapsed the highway bridge. There was a fire under the bridge, and now they said it's going to be, I don't know, they said it's going to be quite a while. I bet that gets built pretty quick because it's got a highway shut down. It's got commerce shut down. When I say commerce, follow the money. So here they are. Now they are going to town because, one, they got each other's back. They know they can't be attacked from behind. So all they have to do is work together. I pulled one thing out of here and I'll read this. It says, how much can you accomplish when you align yourself with the will and plan of God? Well, obviously you can build a wall. We don't have to build a wall. I've said for a long time that I'm going to use Christians as a group of people, not just this church building, but the Baptist building down there, Christians in there, Christians down there, and we all worked together to do something. Wow. If the Jewish people can build a wall in 52 days, as big as this wall was, when we align ourselves with God, we are to be able to do anything we want to do. Anything that we want to do. I had one thing I just wrote down here after reading this chapter, because of what it said kind of at the end with our swords and all that. I wrote down, trust God, but be ready to fight if need be. Sometimes we have to fight for ourselves, don't we? And if we don't fight for ourselves, who's going to fight for us? I mean, Nehemiah talked to God, right? From the start, before he started. He had his whole plan planned out before he even started to move one stone. But God was at the forefront. putting the cart before the horse. I think a lot of times we do that and we leave God out of it. We have what I call three-year-old syndrome. I do it myself. We can't do it ourselves. And when we do it ourselves, we kind of find out we really couldn't do it ourselves. We have so many people that love us. We ask for help. And that's one of the hardest things as a Christian you can do is ask for help. Nehemiah that's another amazing thing. He got all these people to work together. They had to work together. To rebuild that wall in 52 days, they had to work together. I don't think any of the Jews could be there. Jewish people could be, oh, this is stupid, we ain't doing this, because you can't move when you have that. You can't move forward. And Nehemiah was a great leader, one, because he rallied them around enough to get them to do this. With the help, with God at the forefront, Nehemiah accomplished something that was really amazing.